Are we set? Yep. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Buenas tardes. I'm Congresswoman Delia Ramirez, and I have the honor to represent Illinois' 3rd Congressional District, a district that many immigrant families, including my own, call home. A district that is made stronger by immigrant families and is ready to keep fighting to keep families together. As we get this press conference started, I want to start by thanking Congressman Castro, right here, and Senator Blumenthal for their long-standing work to address the harms caused by Trump's inhumane practices of separating children from their parents. I also want to thank every member who's here with us today, and you will get to hear from them in a few moments, that are here to affirm our important work. I want to thank the advocates that are also with us here, the immigrant leaders and human rights defenders who came to be with us today and to stand up for shared humanity, to stand up for families, to stand up for children. Today, we introduce the Family Reunification Task Force Act. The act is an important bill to authorize the task force that President Biden established in 2021. For the last 3 years, the task force has worked with organizations and attorneys around the country to reunite hundreds of families torn apart by Trump's inhumane practice of separating children from their parents, and to also connect them to the needed support. Up to 3,000 children may have been separated from their parents because of Trump's zero-tolerance policy. 3,000. And potentially hundreds more before the policy's official announcement. And folks, it's been years, but there are still 1,360 children who have yet to be united. Toddlers that now are 8 years old that still have not been reunited with their mother, with their father. Parents in the middle of the night waking up to the nightmare that they still don't know where their child is. That is cruel and unacceptable. And while the work is not yet complete, the task force is at risk of getting disbanded by the incoming administration before it can finish its mission of reuniting every family. And while I'm proud to introduce a bill to address these wrongs and underscore the urgent need to reunite these families, it is so painful that we would need this bill. Throughout my first term in Congress, I've had a front row seat to the dehumanizing comments my colleagues have made about immigrants, like my family. Those same lawmakers will next year help resurrect and expand upon some of the cruelest immigration agendas we've seen in country's history. As a proud daughter of Guatemalan immigrants, I know the spirit of love and justice that flows through me for my family and my ancestors, and I know it's strong. And I promise you that in that spirit, we will raise hell and heaven. Next year, when Trump and my colleagues in Congress try to pursue un-American and unconstitutional actions. And we're going to do everything in our power to create the space and support needed for advocates and immigrant defenders to protect families desperate to find safety. And I promise you, the Family Reunification Task Force Act is just the beginning of our fight to protect our immigrant families. With that, I'd like to turn to my friend and the bill co-lead, Congressman Joaquin Castro.
Thank you, Congresswoman Ramirez. Thank you for your leadership on this issue. I'm Joaquin Castro and very proud to represent my hometown of San Antonio, Texas, here in the U.S. House of Representatives. And in the spring of 2018, I was the first person to organize a rally in Texas against the separation of families, against the separation of young kids from their parents as a weapon of cruelty to discourage people from seeking asylum in the United States of America. What happened during Donald Trump's first term of an administration purposely separating young children, causing great trauma to them, some of them perhaps forever lost from their parents. What happened during that time is a dark period in American history. And the work of this committee that President Biden put together, Vice President Harris, that work has been important over the last 4 years, and it must continue. And so I'm proud to be a co-lead with Congresswoman Ramirez, to stand with my colleagues who also understand the importance of this work, to tell the rest of our colleagues, both Republican and Democrat, that this is essential. Most especially because Donald Trump is not going to stop. His rhetoric has ratcheted up. He has promised even far worse things in his second term, which is forthcoming. He campaigned on separating kids from their parents. He campaigned on more of a border wall. He directed a lot of vitriol and hatred and ire against immigrants and migrants in this country. And so we need to protect people's constitutional and civil rights. We need to make sure that the remaining folks who have not been reunited, that there's a continued and sustained and earnest effort to get those kids back with their parents, wherever those parents and kids may be. We can't let Donald Trump and his administration, as they come in January, dissolve this commission. So this legislation is vital. So thank you all so much for everybody, all the advocates over the years who have not stopped pushing, not stopped advocating for these children and their families. It has been, at times, traumatic. It's been tiresome. Some folks are weary from the fight, but that fight is going to intensify. And this legislation is important that we protect people's rights. So thank you all so much. I'd like to introduce now one of my incredible colleagues from Texas who represents Houston, and that's Sylvia Garcia.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman. As he said, I'm Sylvia Garcia, and I represent the Houston area. And I want to first thank the lead and all the sponsors and all my colleagues are here today. It's good to see that we're still focused on such a critical issue, because we simply refuse to forget what happened under the Trump administration and what we must continue to do to make sure that he doesn't do it again. Thousands of children were ripped away from their parents' arms. Families were torn apart by Trump's cruel and inhumane zero-tolerance policy. Children, many toddlers, as Representative Ramirez said, were left alone, afraid, and without their loved ones, thrown in cages. It's been over 6 years, and that trauma continues. There are still more than 1,300 children who have not been reunited with their families. That is simply unacceptable. Let me be clear. This is about common decency. It's about human decency, and it's about people's civil rights. The federal government under Trump separated these children, and we need to make sure that we fix this. We must make sure that no administration, whether it's Democrat or Republican, never ever inflict this kind of cruelty toward families and children. The Family Reunification Task Force Act is a necessary step forward. It will make sure that the critical work of reuniting families continues and that it's not stopped by President-elect Trump. It will make the current task force started by President Biden permanent under law, so that no child is left behind and no family is torn apart again. I come from Houston, a city of immigrants, a city that opens its arms to families in search of a better life. I think about those families every day. I see many of them in my own district, and I just am just warmed by their strength that they show in face of hardship, and it's simply inspiring. They deserve decency, respect, compassion, and a fair process. As a judge, as a former judge, I cannot overemphasize that. Whatever process it uses, it's got to be fair, and it's got to follow the law. Not separation, not detention, or deportation without due process. Their children don't deserve to be traumatized. And I can tell you that we hear from many school officials that children are traumatized just by the fear of the mass deportations that some people see as looming. So this is not just about immigration. It's about who we are as a country and what we stand for. I urge my colleagues in Congress to support our efforts and to commit justice for these families. Let's do the right thing. Let's do the human thing. Let's not stop until we reunite these children with their families. Let's make sure that this never, ever happens again. With that, I'm happy to yield to comments from my colleague from California. I'm sure he's freezing. Mr. Vargas. Freezing in the cold.
Thank you very much for joining us today, and to all my colleagues, again, thank you very much for leading this, the Family Reunification Task Force Act. 7 years ago, as you heard, the Trump administration began a new policy at our southern border of forced family separation. They knew exactly what the results of that policy would be, and they did it anyway. The result was over 4,000 children separated from their parents. They call themselves the Family Values Party. What kind of value is there in separating children from their parents? In fact, we had toddlers in court crying for their moms as the judge were trying to figure out what to do. How is that a family value? How is that an American value? It's not. And a lot like Harry Potter, when Voldemort was returning, we see it today. I mean, we even see it in the sky today. You know, the darkness coming once again. And that's why we have to be prepared. Because once again, we're going to see the same cruelty that we saw before, but with one major change. And that is, I think he's going to be better at it, because he learned how to be crueler. That's the problem. And so we have to stand strong. We need to, again, find these children, reunify them with their families, and fight to make sure that doesn't happen again. Because that's what they're going to do. Once again, they want to separate families. They want this zero policy, this zero tolerance policy, to scare people. And I got to tell you, it does scare people. It does. I have 2 daughters. And every so often, I would take one of my daughters somewhere, and I still remember this, and I still get panicked when I remember. I took one of my daughters to Home Depot, telling her we had to go find Bambi's Big Daddy, because that's the only way she would go. And she did, and at one moment, I don't know why, I was looking at some tools that I was going to maybe purchase, and I look around, and she wasn't there. And if you're a parent, and you've ever gone through that, you know what happens. You almost have a heart attack. When you look and you see your daughter or your child's not there, they've been separated from you. And you immediately want to run to find out where he or she is. And I ran out into the little aisle that they had looking for, and I started screaming. You know, where's my dog? And I ran towards the exit just to make sure that no one was taking her out. Now, it turns out that she's a wanderer, and it turns out in life that's the way she is. She wanders all over the world. She'll be in El Salvador in March. She's all over the place. And she just wandered away. No one took her, but she had been separated from me. I can't imagine a parent having their child yanked away by the authorities, by American authorities, and not being able to get that child back. And that's the situation that we're in, and that's the situation we're going to face. Because once again, this person that has no heart at all, not for immigrants, but for families, is going to separate them once again. He said he's going to do it, and I believe it. So we have to stand strong. We have to fight back. And that's why I thank my colleagues. Let's not give up. A lot of people have given up, it seems like. That's just the opposite of what we need to do. We need to stand up, stand strong, and fight. And that's what I'm going to do, and that's what I hope the rest of us do, and not allow this to happen once again. And with that, again, I thank you all. I thank my colleagues, and I have the pleasure of introducing my colleague, I believe, Rashida Tlaib, is that correct? From Detroit. Michigan.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We all know that our immigrant neighbors are still suffering from the violent xenophobic abuses of the first Trump administration. Families are still separated. Over 1,000 children are still detained without contact with their parents. I still remember being at an elementary school in my district, and a little girl with the longest, most beautiful hair was reading to 3rd grade class. And when I was waiting in the principal's office, waiting for them to come and get me to take them to class, this little girl was just bawling her eyes out. When asked, they said that she had gone home and her family was gone. And she didn't know what happened. So while she was at school, her family, her parents were both taken into custody, and she had nowhere to go. Even in that moment, watching this little girl, I could have never imagined, years later that our administration, the United States government, would be launching a intentional separation of parents, grandparents from their families. When we went to the border, and I know I told Congressman Vargas about this through his district, I was shocked, absolutely shocked, to see a 4-year-old asking me, again in Spanish, "Where's my grandfather?" We will not forget these families. Despite the increasing attacks on the rights of our immigrant neighbors and asylum seekers in recent years and the dangerous return of Trump's anti-immigrant, and really I call it the hate agenda, in the White House, we must continue to fight for our families, for our children. I'm proud to be an original co-sponsor of the Family Reunification Task Force Act. It's critically important to, again, have a sense of restorative justice when it comes to our families. Family separation is inhumane. It should never have happened in the first place. We cannot underestimate that we will see unfold again the moment Trump takes office come January. We need as many people as possible, every neighbor, every corner, to resist this hateful agenda. We need to fight back. When I was at a masjid in Flint, Michigan, I remember a 16-year-old girl asking me, Sister Rashida, why hasn't anybody said anything about the Muslim ban? I looked at that audience and I said, how many of you said anything when he, the same person that's wanted to launch this Muslim ban, running on that agenda, how many of you said anything when he called Mexicans rapists? See, we can't wait until one community is targeted. We have to stand up together again now. We are not a country that is divided. We are a country that is disconnected. And one thing we can connect on is we will not allow hateful agenda to come through our neighborhoods. It's a form of violence and trauma that will never, ever be able to leave our neighborhoods. It will, again, be generational. President Biden is still in the White House, as we all know, and he must take immediate executive action to protect our immigrant neighbors. We have seen Trump's agenda, extreme agenda, and his tactics of stoking racism and division, of pitting our communities against each other. Trump has doubled down on his pledge to carry out the largest mass deportation effort of our country. And my colleague is right. People said he'll never do the Muslim ban. Well, guess what? He did. He has every intention, like he said, to use our military and to use every resource possible to, again, rip our immigrant neighbors away from us. This means more of the ICE raids, unleashing federal agents and police in our states and cities to raid people's homes, the homes of our neighbors, going into churches, masjids, hospitals, schools, anywhere and everywhere to target our immigrants. We have also heard their intentions to round up U.S. citizens who are part of mixed status families as part of their deportation effort. We know, and I know, so many of our families married to U.S. citizens can't adjust their status in the United States. Why? Because we haven't had the courage in this Congress to fix our broken and inhumane immigration system. There's a lot we can do to have each other's back, and we must commit to protecting our vulnerable neighbors at every turn. We need to understand the work we can be doing right now together to keep each other safe. If you're a student, that means looking into and advocating that your school enact policies to make sure ICE and CPB aren't allowed onto school grounds or campuses to target your immigrant peers. The same is true for your workplace and local businesses. That means sharing Know Your Rights information, engaging your local city council meetings, pushing your local elected officials, mayoral offices, governor offices, local leaders to make sure that there are measures in place to protect our immigrant neighbors. What we saw in the previous Trump administration was horrific. We know already what he is capable of. And again, many of the children, we had some come to Michigan. Some come to Michigan that still haven't seen their parents. They have no idea where they are. We must have honest conversations with our friends, our family members, our coworkers to say, we need to take a stand at this moment. We need to show up for each other because immigrants are an essential part of every single one of our communities. And it is wrong. It is wrong to punish them because we decided to allow those that continue to profit off of our broken immigration system, our inhumane immigration system, to allow it to deteriorate to this point. We can do better as a country. I know we can. Many of our neighbors and many of the children that have been impacted deserve, again, for us to follow our own laws, to follow our own protection, our values. So I hope we can continue to stand together very strongly and push back. With that, I'm going to ask, did Jesse speak yet? Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, please. So Jesse, how do you say your name?
I'm Jason.
Jason. Okay, Jason hasn't spoken. So Jason Boyd from Kind.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. Representative Ramirez, Representative Castro, and other distinguished members, thank you for your leadership on the vitally important Family Reunification Task Force Act. I'm Jason Boyd, the Vice President of U.S. Federal Policy for Kids in Need of Defense. Through legal representation, social services, and other work directly and with partners in the United States, Mexico, Central America, and Europe, Kind strives for a world that upholds the well-being of unaccompanied and separated children. Our organization has proudly assisted the Family Reunification Task Force, helped reunify hundreds of separated family members, and served thousands of individuals impacted by family separation. Through this work, Kind has observed firsthand family separation's devastating impacts, enduring trauma, developmental impairment, the pain of growing up without your loved ones at your side. We've also seen firsthand the integral functions the task force serves, from identifying separated family members to facilitating reunification to supporting the provision of vital services. In a host of respects, the task force has helped make families whole. But the work is not done. Too many loved ones remain apart. That's why the Family Reunification Task Force Act is essential. By enshrining this initiative, the Act would ensure its work going forward and that no stone is left unturned in bringing child and parent together. Kind is honored to endorse this legislation. We applaud these congressional champions, and we look forward to continuing to work in partnership to protect unaccompanied and separated children. Thank you all, and I believe I'm turning it over to Jesse. Great.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Delia Ramirez, Congressman Castro, Sylvia Garcia, Juan Vargas, and everyone who is co-sponsoring this legislation. I'm really honored to be here. I'm a senior policy analyst with the National Immigrant Justice Center, which for 4 decades has worked to ensure human rights protections and access to justice for immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers. And headquartered in Chicago, NIJC provides legal services through its staff and pro bono network to more than 11,000 individuals each year. As an organization that's represented separated children and their parents, NIJC has witnessed firsthand the long-lasting traumatic impact of the family separation program. NIJC has worked to reunify families and continues to offer legal services to families impacted by the zero tolerance policy. And of course, we're now preparing to defend against the worst policies that we are expecting from the incoming administration. We know that family separation and cruelty against children are endemic to the mass deportation and anti-asylum policies that we expect to come. And Congress will be the first line of defense against the incoming Trump administration and their plans to tear families apart. So measures such as the Family Reunification Task Force Act are absolutely imperative to reunite families and defend against the repeat of the worst human rights abuses of the Trump administration. NIJC is incredibly grateful for champions in Congress here today and those co-sponsoring this act who are showing that they will fight and stand up for the rights of immigrant communities. Thank you so much, and I will pass it back to Congresswoman Delia Ramirez.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I want to thank every one of our speakers today. To my congressional colleagues who are here today, who are leading the front in California, in Texas, in Chicago, and all over, in Michigan. And I want to also say that, I can't stop thinking about what Congressman Vargas said. For what felt like an eternity and hours, he didn't see his daughter at the store. And the thoughts that came through his mind as he was looking for her. I'm not a parent, but that visual keeps playing in my mind. And I think about the number of parents that right now are wondering, is he eating? Is she eating? Are they alive? Are they being mistreated? Do they remember me? Do they still love me? Do they know that I love them? One thing I think is important for us to say over and over with the organizations that are here, with my colleagues, is that we pledge. We pledge to be in the fight to protect our immigrant communities with everything we can and have. And as you said, Jesse, that first defense fight starts here in Congress. We have to have a unified front against Trump's attempts to undermine our Constitution and to disregard the humanity of those seeking opportunity and safety. Family reunification is a cause that should transcend politics. Family, by birth, by choice, or by community, is the foundation of any society. And when we tear families apart, including immigrant families, we're undermining the social, economic, and human connection. The Family Reunification Task Force Act represents a commitment to restoring dignity, compassion, and justice to our immigration system. I invite every one of my colleagues to join the fight. I invite my friends who are listening, if your member has not joined as a co-sponsor, to call them and ask them to join the act. I want to thank everyone for being here today. Y a trabajar se ha dicho. Let's get to work. Thank you. Para adelante. Como dijo Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia, para adelante.
Adelante. Thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you, sister. So you got your work cut out for you, young man.
Yes, we do. We're bracing for that, but with champions like yourself, I think we can make it through. I hope the church is coming.
Was there a quick question? Sorry. Go ahead.
Stacey Robinson, Epoch Times. So we know that both chambers of Congress are going to be there'll be a slight majority with the Republicans in each chamber of Congress. Have you guys identified a plan to sort of reach across the aisle and get votes on the other side so you can pass your legislation?
Yeah. Look, we certainly know that those low margins means that every single one Republican would have to be voting one way or another. Of course, we're going to be working with any Republican colleague that understands that keeping families together is not a Republican or Democratic thing. It is the right thing to do as an American. So I certainly look forward to it. I know every one of us here, when we can find an ally, and I think that there's a few that understand that there's a broken immigration system and children should not be separated from their families, to be able to work with them to block any of the legislation that Trump tries to come through the House and Senate.
Do you see any opportunities to advance the legislation in lame duck?
Yeah, it is certainly our goal to do so. I mean, 1,360 children have not been found. If we had found every one of those children, we wouldn't need the task force, one would say. But 1,360 are still missing. That task force is needed more than ever, especially as we think about the potential threats that come with mass deportations and another threat of more separation. So we're hoping to be able to move it along. There will be a lot of work to be done, and certainly that is the goal.
Can you just sort of speak to the wilderness now that this advocacy is in this moment? It's not as if Democrats made an affirmative case for immigrants during the election. So why do you think that that the movement is in this space right now where they have such little support?
Yeah, I want to add to it, but I wanted Congressman Vargas, did you want to also answer?
Sure. Well, I would say this, that some of us did advocate quite strongly for immigrants and for those coming to our country trying to find refuge. I was one of those, and I still stand by that. Our country has always been a refuge for people in need, people that are in danger of losing their lives, and we should always stand up for that. Asylum has always been an international principle and certainly an American principle. And so we continue to stand for that. I think it's the right thing. I think the reason that we lost is we didn't lean into these things. I think that was the problem. And when the question was asked, any colleagues on the other side, well, we're going to give them a chance to be Christians, right? They say that there's such good Christians. Well, pulling family apart, tearing families apart, that's not a Christian thing to do. We're going to give them an opportunity to be good Christians and keep these families together. So again, we're going to call on some of them to say, you say that you're a Christian and I believe you. Here's your opportunity to show it. with deeds, not just in words. So again, we need to lean into this.
But in 2021, for instance, when Democrats held the majority, why wasn't this codified into law?
Well, we tried, of course, because the reason we couldn't get it through is we couldn't get the votes on the other side. I mean, when you get, and I never agreed with the 60 votes on the Senate side. When you can't do that, when you can't get 60 votes, you can't get anything passed. That's why.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.